2015's Everest was based on the true-life Mount Everest disaster of 1996, recreating the overwhelming challenges faced by the real climbers who were trapped on that mountain almost 30 years ago. One of the single deadliest days in the recorded history of the world's tallest peak, the film recounts the expedition taken on by two groups of mountaineers that ended in death for 8 climbers, including the two experienced leaders of the expeditions, Rob Hall, Jason Clark, and Scott Fisher, Jake Gyllenhaal. The fates of Everest's real-life inspiration served as a tragic reminder of the inherent risk in attempting to scale something like Mount Everest, and 2015's Everest highlights the awe and horror one encounters on such a journey. The tragic events that befell the 1996 Mount Everest disaster were recreated in Everest with notable consistency and accuracy, although some elements of the story were tweaked for the big screen. Here's the true story behind Everest and how it compares to real life. How many climbers died during 1990's Mount Everest disaster? 12 climbers were lost on Everest throughout the entire 1996 spring season, with 5 of them depicted in the movie. This makes it one of the deadliest single seasons in the history of Everest expeditions. 8 of these deaths happened during the disaster itself, which occurred on May 10 and 11. The Adventure Consultants expedition suffered 4 casualties, including team leader Rob Hall. The Mountain Madness team only lost 1 member, their team leader, Scott Fisher. Meanwhile, a simultaneous Indo-Tibetan border police expedition suffered 3 deaths from climbers who approached the summit from the north face. There were a total of 33 climbers on May 10 spread out across 4 separate expeditions, including Adventure Consultants and Mountain Madness, which directly inspired the film. The deaths of Andy Harris and Doug Hansen remain mysteries, as their bodies were never recovered. Instead, their deaths were dramatized in Everest. Hansen plunges off the side of a cliff while Harris suffers from the effects of hypothermia. How long was the May 1996 Mount Everest expedition? Rob Hall's body, Jason Clark, overlooking Everest in Everest, 2015. The 1996 Mount Everest expedition took place on May 10, 1996. The trek began at midnight and was intended to be concluded by 2 p.m. local time, which is considered to be the cutoff for climbers to turn around and safely return to base camp. However, delays in the climb and increasingly harsh weather slowed the ascent and resulted in the expeditions being stuck on the mountain as the blizzard intensified. Some of the climbers didn't even reach the peak of the mountain until well after 5 o'clock local time. Many climbers were forced to endure the blizzard overnight. Some, like Andy Harris and Doug Hansen, were lost in the storm. Yasuko Namba, Rob Hall, and Scott Fisher were forced to be left behind by the other survivors after their health deteriorated to the point where rescue would be impossible. Fisher was the final confirmed death of the expedition, as his frozen body was discovered on the evening of May 11 by his teammate Anatoly Bukreev. The final survivors finally made it to base camp on May 14, including the severely injured but miraculously alive Beck Weathers. What caused May 1990's Mount Everest deaths? Naoko Mori as Yasuko Namba lying dead in the snow in Everest, 2015. The most obvious cause of the 1996 Mount Everest disaster was a massive blizzard that bore down upon the mountain during the expedition. The storm brought more snow than any of the respective parties had expected earlier than they had planned, trapping them close to the summit as the snow fully settled in around them. This buried the ropes that had been established as a pathway back down the mountain, reducing the clear path back through the storm. This made escape next to impossible even for the more seasoned climbers in the respective groups like Yasuko Namba, who died from exposure on May 11. Further complicating matters were several technical mistakes. Guides failed to set up fixed ropes for other climbers, and the health of some of the climbers caused delays that led to the expeditions being caught by the full brunt of the blizzard. There was also a lack of oxygen canisters, which impacted the health of the climbers as they tried to descend. Every survivor of the 1996 Mount Everest disaster, and how they survived. Michael Groom. An experienced Australian-born mountaineer played by Thomas M. Wright in Everest. Groom had previously scaled Mount Everest before the fateful 1996 expedition. Groom was the only Adventure Consultants guide to survive the journey. Groom lived by remaining with the rest of the Adventure Consultants team and moving down the mountain on May 12. Frank Fishbeck. Frank Fishbeck, played by Todd Boyce in Everest. Fishbeck was a climber who had previously attempted to scale the mountain. Fishbeck survived the 1996 disaster by weathering the blizzard overnight with the other survivors. Stuart Hutchison. A Toronto-based cardiologist played by Dimitri Garitzas in Everest, Hutchinson was one of the few Adventure Consultants clients with extensive mountain climbing experience before the 1996 disaster. Stuart survived by remaining with the rest of the Adventure Consultants survivors during the storm.